Hello and welcome to the July 13th, 2022 meeting of the Edina Planning Commission. Just before we get kicked off, I want to announce kind of my general spiel that the city is committed to continuing to receive and hear your input on matters. We've been collecting public input through voicemail and our engagement website, bettertogetheredina.org. It's important that you know that all comments that have been submitted have been received and read prior to the start of this meeting. You do not need to submit the same feedback in another way. All that feedback is considered equally regardless of the way in which it was submitted. And I know even this time we had some physical correspondence as well. Tonight there is one public hearing. Individuals who want to provide testimony remotely for a public hearing can do so by calling 1-888-504-7949 and enter participant passcode 356420. Everyone is allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address, and staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they've gone over the 3 minutes. And just a reminder, you do not need to call in or comment live tonight if you've already provided feedback. So please don't repeat any information already presented and provide testimony if you have new comments or information to bring forward. And so with that, we will do our roll call tonight.
Commissioner Padilla.
Present.
Commissioner Miranda.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Commissioner Elkhire.
Here.
Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Chair Agnew.
Here. Thank you. First on the agenda is approval of our meeting agenda. So I would entertain a motion for tonight's agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, our agenda for tonight has passed. Next up is our approval of meeting minutes from our two previous meetings, both June 15th as well as June 29th. And for that, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any changes at all to these? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the meeting minutes from June 15th and June 29th of 2022 have been approved. Before we get into our community comment, I wanted to give special recognition to Commissioner Joanne Olson, who has officially retired from her time as a part of the Planning Commission. She had been on the Planning Commission for 8.5 years. So just really want to appreciate and thank her for her service to the Planning Commission. And I'm sure she is at home watching this. So Joanne, thank you for all that you did. Next is our community comment. So as a reminder, community comment is only available in person. So we will now hear from residents who would like to speak about something not on tonight's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing. You may speak up to 3 minutes. After giving your full name and address, the green light on your podium will turn on. When you have 30 seconds remaining, the yellow light will turn on, and when you are out of time, the red light will turn on. So with that, I will open it up to anyone in the room who might be here to provide community comment tonight. All right, I am not seeing any community comment, so we will move on to our public hearings. So first up is for a 12.5-foot rear yard setback variance, and Assistant Planner Ocker will present tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. This is a 12.5-foot variance request to the 25-foot rear yard setback requirement for principal structures to allow an addition to replace the deck. The addition will be smaller than the deck that it will replace. It's located at 4353 Oakdale, as highlighted here. Here's a little closer view of the house. The house looked like this prior to 2016. This house has been removed and replaced with a new home. This is a survey of the existing home currently with the deck that's currently there. Because of the depth of the lot, the minimum lot size in the R1 district is 75 feet in width. This lot is 80 feet in width by 120 feet in depth. This lot is 80 feet in depth, so it's 40 feet short of the minimum depth requirement. So when this house was originally built and designed, you can see that it's pretty much of a rectangle. It fits exactly within the required setbacks. So front yard setback is roughly 26 and a half, 27 feet. That's the minimum front yard setback based on the neighboring properties along Oakdale, that front Oakdale. The side yard setbacks are 10 feet. The house is built up to the 10-foot setbacks. And then the rear yard setback is 25 feet. So the back wall of the house does go right up against that 25-foot rear yard setback. Decks can be 5 feet from the side and rear lot lines, so the deck does meet the setback requirements. The existing house itself is within the maximum allowable lot coverage requirements. However, with the deck area, there's quite a bit of deck area that pushes them up beyond the allowable 30% limit. They're at 31.5%, so they are over on the existing building coverage. They are under currently the 50% maximum impervious surface ordinance requirement. So what they are planning or hoping to do is replace that deck with a smaller addition. So the deck was about 27, 28 feet in length by roughly 12 feet, and they're going to be reducing that down to 20 and a half feet by 12 feet. So they'd be maintaining that existing non-conforming setback of the deck. However, it will be smaller, and it will have a basement underneath. Currently, just to look at the proposed versus existing hardcover, we have 46 and a half feet that is being proposed, so it'll be reduced for impervious surface from 48 to 46. And then again, the 31.5% will be reduced down to 29.9%, so just underneath the maximum 30%. So this is the existing basement area. With that deck, you can see the posts above on the main, and then what that will be replaced with is a bedroom or exercise room that will have an egress window on the south side. It's smaller than the deck. And then this is the existing main floor with the deck, larger, and that addition that will replace it. And then on the second floor, it's going to have a flat roof. So that's what the visual will be from the rear yard, and then from the south. And then some perspectives of what's existing there currently and what they're proposing. To give you a little idea of what's going on along the block, this is the property directly to the north. Most of the lots, well, there are only a few of them along that east side of Oakdale. They're almost like a perfect square. They're very shallow at 80 feet. This one, unfortunately, is on a corner lot, so they have deeper setbacks along the corner. Their rear yard setback is at 6.5 feet, side yard setback's at 3.5 feet, and their deck is probably within inches of the rear yard. And then the house directly to the south has, I believe it might be a porch at 4361 Oakdale that has a 13-foot rear yard setback. So in terms of the adjacent homes that are along Oakdale, the setback that's being proposed or that they will be maintaining is not dissimilar to what is occurring. So rear yard setback variances are not ones that we typically see because there's usually the most opportunity to add onto your house behind your house in the rear yard. The only instances it seems like we run into an issue with that is when you have these shallow lots. And here's an example of one that received a variance for a 15.8-foot rear yard with a setback variance of 9.2 feet. And you can see it's a very shallow lot. It's wide, but very shallow. And another similar situation where it was actually ended up being a 5-foot setback, so there was a 20-foot variance approved for that particular property. So the primary issue is it a reasonable use? And the proposed use is permitted in the R1 single dwelling unit district. It complies with the zoning standards with the exception of that east rear yard setback requirement. The addition will replace the deck that will improve on the building coverage. I mean, currently, without the deck, the house is lower than the maximum amount of coverage, but they are constrained on all sides. There's no opportunity to add on to the house without the benefit of a variance. The shallow lot depth and limited design opportunities was not a self-created situation by the applicant. This was house, as my understanding, it was not built specifically for them. But again, there's no opportunity without the benefit of a variance to modify. The proposed addition conforms to all other zoning standards, and granting the variance will not necessarily alter the essential character of the neighborhood. All other aspects of the home conform to the ordinance requirements. The adjacent homes, they have some similar challenges along Oakdale with those very square, shallow lots. And the addition is not visible from the street, so the streetscape isn't going to change. So staff does support the request and does recommend approval. There have been numerous comments on Better Together, and we've received them through emails. The concerns have primarily, I believe, been about massing and about grading, drainage, and stormwater management. We do have the architect, Mary Townsend, with Chisel Architecture, who is present for the homeowners. And then I believe we also have Ross Bintner, the engineering services manager, on a call if there are any grading, drainage, or stormwater management questions. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Getting started with questions, we will go with Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, thanks. The overall, the building height for, so oftentimes that's provided. I mean, the height of the new house. Home.
Oh, of the existing house? That's,
well, was this a tear down rebuild? Or,
it was.
Okay, but the overall height is within all.
Yes, the overall height requirement, because it's an 80-foot wide lot, would be 35 feet, and they're at 31 and a half feet. I didn't include that in the chart only because the house is existing and that's not changing, but it was well within the ordinance requirements when it was built back in 2017.
Okay, so it's lower than it could be.
Yes.
Right.
Technically, yes.
And it's smaller footprint than existed, correct? I mean,
It's smaller footprint with the deck, no. But
okay.
the house itself
Okay.
within, yes.
And the hard surface has also been reduced.
Correct.
Good. Thank you.
Commissioner Alkire.
Would you just confirm for me, because you showed a slide that showed the hard surface existing and proposed, and it looked like the hard surface percent was down. Is that right?
That's what they are proposing, that's correct.
On the proposed. Then the engineering report that was in the packet says the project proposes an increase in impervious surface from 2,600 and change to 2,900 and change, mitigated by the construction of an infiltration trench. So I'm not sure whether it's increasing or decreasing, the impervious surface, the hard surface.
The surveyor is showing that it is decreasing. I guess I would have Ross, if he's available, answer. Engineering did the review on the impervious surface. My understanding is that it's currently under, and it will continue to be under. I guess I'm looking at the surveyor, they're indicating that it is going down to
Okay.
46.5%.
That's what it looked like to me too on the drawings, but this kind of threw me a little bit. Because maybe this is a question for the architect, let me know if it is, but I was having a hard time discerning how this proposed project was going to make the stormwater runoff worse, because it seems to me that there was more or less an apples to apples trade in the location and kind of hardcover, and I couldn't tell how it was affecting it. So if that's a question for the architect, let me know.
Architect or Ross,
Okay.
probably, yes.
All right, thank you.
Ross, are you on the line? Would you be able to speak to that now?
I am on the line. Can you hear me, Planning Commission?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thanks. When we did our review, we took it back to the initial stormwater plan that was provided as part of the demo rebuild in 2016. And at that time, a deck wasn't proposed, and the mitigations for the site included no deck. So when we have a permit come in, we do a 5-year look back. This is within the 5-year look back, so we are essentially bringing it back to its original stormwater management plan when it comes to stormwater.
Okay, thanks, Ross. But just to confirm then, compared to as it sits today versus the proposed plan, doesn't seem to be any material increase in hardcover. Is that right?
I agree with the numbers that the surveyor and the planning commission or the planning department have put together.
So
Okay.
that's a yes.
That's a yes.
Yes.
So the proposed project would not be expected to influence stormwater management on this property. If that's really what I'm trying to get to. Is that correct?
No, by our policy, we're going to require stormwater management for this because we have the look back period and we bring it back to its originally approved stormwater management plan.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess I was kind of confused by that, so I'm going to dig in a little bit more. Does that mean, Ross, that there was a stormwater management request or requirement put in place in 2017 or 2016 when this was initially done, and that wasn't followed? Or I guess I'm curious why we're saying,
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my understanding was it was followed, that they did create the, they followed their plan at the time. In the intervening time, a deck was built. So that wasn't part of a grading permit. It didn't go back and reference the stormwater management plan. That can happen based on the thresholds for a grading permit. But at the time of a permit that again triggers, that's when we do the look back. So we're making sure that there's not intervening improvements that suddenly set the bar forward for stormwater. So we're bringing it back to the previously approved stormwater management plan.
And so the understanding that you have is that this additional excavation for the additional land kind of below grade and the additional coverage will not impact the storm water plan that was set forth 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. It works with the prior approved, and it adds on to that.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any more questions? Okay, Commissioner Padilla, did you have a question?
My questions were largely the same about the hardscape. I did want to know how many square feet is the home and how many will it be?
How much
Square footage
of the house
Right.
currently, like on each level?
altogether?
Yeah, I don't have that. The architect could probably
Okay, I thought
give you
I,
that
I
answer.
read 4,400. Nobody remembers that. Okay, don't worry about it. It's 4,400, right?
I do have one question. So was there a variance required when the deck was added after the construction? Or speak to how we're over on the lot coverage?
There was no variance processed. There was a permit for the deck. I can't speak to why the size, apparently, with all of it calculated together, goes up to 31.5%.
So it was potentially something that was missed, or like should there have been a variance that was applied to this and it just wasn't considered at that time?
So there was no variance for the house itself. It would have been the deck. And there was a permit for a deck, and it met the requirements for lot coverage.
Okay. But then how did we get to the state of having more lot coverage? Okay.
I can't answer that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, so I'm assuming they couldn't, so normally they would be able to, once they get this, if they got this variance, they could expand the new area as long as it didn't encroach anymore on the 25 or whatever, the 12 and a half foot setback, but they can't because they're already at maximum lot coverage. Is that true?
So are you speaking, if they do the improvement?
Right, say this passes, and,
Sure.
they get this, and they build this, because all they're getting is all they're asking for, or all they need is a setback variance.
Correct.
So they could extend it along the house in the future without a variance, if it weren't at the maximum
Correct.
hardscape.
After
Okay.
this, the footprint is at the maximum.
Okay.
Actually, it'll bring it back to where it should be,
Right.
given the size of the deck.
Right.
But they won't be able to add anything else to the footprint in terms of the principal structure. You are allowed to have a 150 square foot deck above and beyond the maximum coverage to allow to have, a small sitting area. But other than that, no, they would not have any other opportunity.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. And then, in terms of the variances that you showed for other similar properties, were any of those tear downs and rebuilds? No.
No, they were additions to an existing situation. Actually, both of those, and I was trying to find examples, but we don't see very many rear yard setback variances. Both of those are along the old streetcar line on 44th, because those are very shallow lots.
Right.
But generally, we have lots that are at least 120 feet deep, at least.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other question, Commissioner Smith?
Sure. Are you aware of any flooding or water damage issues of homes in that region or with this house in the past that you could speak to?
I believe Ross could answer those questions, but I can't.
So maybe I
Sure.
could pass
Thanks,
it on to
Commissioner
Ross. Sorry.
Yeah, so this site drains to both a landlocked basin and a basin that includes structural flooding issues. Landlocked means there's no natural outlet, and structural flooding issues for us means that the 100-year storm inundation level impacts or is adjacent to structures. So in those cases, we are more protective in our stormwater rules to actually cause no increase in volume or rate downstream in the 10 and the 100-year event. So the regulations are protective, but there are downstream properties that are exposed to flooding.
Okay, thank you. And one other question. If we do not approve this today, would that deck that's currently existing just stay there, essentially? Do you have any plans of removing it? Or is it just going to be a structure that's just going to remain?
It would remain.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for either city staff or the architect. All right, then I think we should go to our public hearing. So we will now hear from residents who would like to provide testimony. To participate, call in now at 888-504-7949 and enter participant passcode 356420. Everyone is allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address, and staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they have gone over 3 minutes. For those of you who are in person, the color indicators are on the lecterns. And remember, it is not necessary to provide testimony if you have already provided comments via voicemail, bettertogether.edina.org, or if you have sent them in another way. Please provide a testimony if you have new comments or information to bring forward. So first, I will go to anyone who is in person tonight to provide testimony for this public hearing. All right, seeing none, I will look to our call-in and see if anyone has dialed in for that tonight.
We do have one caller who dialed in. Actually, it looks like we might have two callers right now. So now would be the time if they want to give testimony. They could hit *1, and we'll have to wait a few seconds to let them catch up on that side.
Wonderful. So if you are on the line and you would like to provide public testimony, please hit *1 to be added to the queue.
Our first caller is in the queue to speak, so if the operator can please unmute their line, and then that person can go ahead with their name and address, please.
Greetings, Planning Commission members. My name is Lane Ayers, and I live at 4407 Branson Street. My house was in the photo to the west of the best home. I live, there's one house between their house and ours. We can see most of the back of their house from our house and our backyard. And this is hard for me to say because the owners are nice people and have nothing against them personally. I think I first just want to address the questions that have been raised about flood issues and permeable surfaces. I'm assuming there's some permeability in the deck that is there. The new addition would be totally impermeable, and so I don't understand how that could not be an increase in the lack of permeability for the property. Secondly, with regard to water or flood kinds of issues, both the neighbors, the next door neighbors to the north and to the west, have had runoff issues from the existing property. In fact, the neighbors to the north had significant water in their basement that required close to $2,000 to replace rugs and other replacements. So that's that. But my main other concern is simply this house was built in 2017, 5 years ago. It was not a spec house. The present owners bought the land. The house was torn down. They hired architects and builders to build the house they wanted that took up 100% of the code allowed space. My question is there any way that this planning commission would have allowed a variance of 12.5 feet at the time the house was constructed? If the answer is no, then I don't understand how you could entertain a variance to enlarge the size of the house now. I appreciate that the owners would like a larger house. Many people move to new houses when they want a larger house. They've chosen to ask for a variance, and I know the planning staff is supporting that, but that doesn't mean that the planning commission has to grant a variance just because it's been asked for. So, thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
We do have one other caller, it appears, on the line. They have not entered the queue yet at this point.
All right, so just a final reminder that if you have called in and you would like to speak, press star 1. Otherwise, we'll give it 30 more seconds. Okay. All right, seeing that we have no other public testimony, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the public hearing portion has closed.
I may have missed it, but did the applicant or architect want to present anything?
I had that the homeowner would not be in attendance, but
I just wanted to
did
offer it out.
the architect want to present anything?
I'm Marcy Townsend, I'm the architect, choose architecture. No, we didn't have anything additional.
Okay,
Okay,
To provide clarification or additional info.
thanks.
thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Bennett, for clarifying. Okay, so now that the public hearing is closed, are there any additional questions that any commissioners have? Commissioner Smith?
Yes, and this question is for the architect. Could you just talk a little bit more about flood mitigation plans? From what I could tell now, the current deck, would allow some permeability of water drainage. And from what we heard before, there was some water issues and it's a sensitive area. So if we build now a new deck essentially with underground that's more impervious, there should be some kind of a floodwater mitigation because I could only see that as going up. So could you tell me more about what the flood mitigation plans look like with this new addition?
And please, I don't know what mic we should have. Perfect. We will get you a mic.
As part of our application, we had a full stormwater management plan drafted up by an engineer. And as part of his plan, he acknowledged, he did the calculations, yes, there is current runoff issues. And his proposed plan is a 70 square foot underground catch basin of sorts. It's an infiltration trench, which is basically a 3 foot deep stone undergrade place for the water to settle and hold it until it has its own, through natural gravity, it's able to seep back into the ground. 70 square feet is what he calculated to capture and mitigate both the existing issues that are on the site and anything additional that this proposed addition would cause.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Commissioner Bennett?
Just a clarification maybe for Ross, who's on the line too. As far as I understand it, we do treat decks and patios as impervious, even though water might seep through it. I mean, depending on the design, you often don't want to allow some permeability below your deck. And a lot of times there's things in place to shed water quicker underneath it for that reason. So maybe Ross could just comment on that too, if that is correct, that we objectively look at a deck as an impervious surface. Just from an engineering
Councilmember
standpoint in
Bennett.
the city.
Yeah, I think I'd want to phone a friend and see if Chris knows the language better than I do, but I think you're correct that decks are considered impervious. I know patios are.
That is correct. So I guess just to go along with that comment, yes, water can get through, but if they're designed well, like they're almost like a roof that leaks a little bit. So, I mean, yes, there's a marginal change, but there really isn't that much of a change in hardcover when it comes to what's being proposed and what exists today. Even though it feels a lot different, it just isn't.
I will open it up to comments.
I could kick it off here. So from what I could tell from the presentation today, there's an existing deck that, for whatever reason, got approved for the setback variance then. It seems like it meets the hardcover requirements or slightly above the hardcover requirements. This change is going to do a couple of things, right? It's going to maintain the existing deck size. It's going to make it a little bit smaller. So it's now going to be the hardcover. It's going to be a little bit smaller than what it is today. The issues around flooding, there's a plan to mitigate that with the 70-foot trench that would absorb the water. So hopefully that's going to go away. If we do nothing today, the deck is going to stay there, so it doesn't change anything, and it's going to continue the issues that exist currently. So from what I could tell, the changes that are being proposed are improvements, not only in the hardcover coverage, but also the flood mitigation. And so it seems like it's moving in the right direction from my point of view, from what I could tell. I'm open to hearing what other commissioners think, but that's kind of how I'm seeing it at this point.
Commissioner Bennett.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Smith. You said it exactly the way I have a take on it too. And I mean, just acknowledging the public comments and the neighbors, like clearly there's a situation here that people are currently experiencing. If there wasn't such a situation, I doubt we'd hear much comments, because when you look at kind of our main conditions of why we grant variances, relieving practical difficulties that are reasonable for reasonable use, as well as these aren't unique circumstances, self-created, as well as altering the essential character of the neighborhood. To me, you see this plan, like, oh, that's tight. But you look at all of the other houses and lots around it, it's all pretty tight there. So, I mean, you have a house that's has a deck within inches of setback lines or beyond it, and it's kind of, that's the character of that area. Things are closer. So I think that's what exacerbates any sort of change, just visually. And if you have existing issues, this feels like it's not helping them. But as far as I look at the data, and if there weren't the infiltration trench, like a deep French drain basically, like, I wouldn't support this. But because there is one that makes it even better than what's existing there right now, it's a solution that should mitigate issues for neighbors beyond if they did nothing. So it's a tough one, but I support this for the same reasons. And sorry, one thing to add. Just acknowledging what the applicant's doing. It's a flat roof of a one-story addition. I think that matters. A lot of times we'd see additions that match the full height, or it's one story and you have gables on your roof and with a sloped roof that visually impacts the situation more. I think they're doing a very limited addition that seems respectful as much as it could be. So I just want to acknowledge that it didn't have to be like that.
Commissioner Elkhire.
Yes, I would agree with Commissioners Bennett and Smith on those points. To add, I would say it was persuasive to me that at the same time as we're granting a rear setback variance, the lot coverage is actually improving and smaller. So to me, that makes a difference for, the reasonable concern about massing and building size, particularly in this pretty tight spot of the city. If we were attempting to go over the building coverage percent at the same time, to me, that would be a lot more concerning. And also, I count on the city to have a approved stormwater plan when the permit's issued, and to follow up on that before the occupancy permit's granted, and to make sure that we're doing the right thing for these homeowners and for their neighbors as well. But there's a process for that, and we have the ability to manage that. So I would support this project.
Commissioner Miranda.
So Commissioner Bennett brought up a good point about it being one story. So then I have a question, maybe this is for the city. And it's sort of related to my previous question, which was actually horizontal. This is vertical. With this setback variance, could they extend that to a second story at some point? No.
Not without a variance, because that alternate setback standard has to be on the same floor, and so if they go above, they'd have to get a variance for that.
Okay.
Or you can put a condition on it saying,
Okay, I didn't know that. That's good to know. I am kind of struggling with this. It is a smaller lot than, kind of a lot of Edina. A lot of times when we look at variances, setback variances, for example, there's one on Alden Drive and Morningside Road we looked at last year. And a lot of times we're looking at houses that, if it's a tear down, and because of current standards, there's 25 square feet of buildable space or something. And those are pretty clear that, there are existing houses there that fit neatly within the community there. But this one, what worries me about this one is sort of exception becoming precedent, which is something that I think happens a lot. And where you have, for example, it was okay to build a deck because decks can be within 5 feet of the lot line, and then it's we're just converting this to a enclosed space, but we have different standards for that. So it's this competing interest between, yes, that's true, but also there's a reason why we have a 25-foot setback. And what I'm struggling with similarly is that this is a smaller lot, but it's not a tiny lot. Again, in Morningside, a lot of times you have a 50-foot wide lot, which really limits what you can do if you're on a corner property, or as Mizaka was saying, on the former streetcar line, those lots were very, very narrow because that was the streetcar width. So I'm just kind of, I don't know, I keep going back and forth on this one. Thanks.
I take everybody's point, and I certainly agree with the ambiguity of that issue. The only other comment that I wanted to make is that we do take all of the comments that we receive from neighbors and community input seriously. I think we received a lot. They were all read and looked at. I drove over there this morning to look at to try to understand what was brought up, and I understand that the neighborhood is being completely torn up, and I think this adds to the neighbor and the community's frustrations and ideas of additional construction. Makes it that much harder to deal with, but they obviously need to be considered as completely separate things. But the neighborhood was a mess. Still in all, we do take it into account. We'd still, take everything very seriously and read all the comments. I, however, will remain in favor of it.
So I think I echo a lot of what Commissioner Miranda said it feels like there's something different about this one in terms of precedent. And that's why, I appreciate, Assistant Planner Ocker bringing together some past variances that to me, I think are on a larger scale, right? Like you look at some of the variances and it's a couple of feet, but for this, a 12.5 foot variance for a 25 foot setback is a 50% variance. And so I really wanted to understand, are there a lot of other situations like this? And the two that were presented tonight were situations where it wasn't just recently a tear down rebuild. And that's where when, some of the guidelines that we're supposed to consider as a commission is, were these things self-created? I think in this situation, I guess the exact definition of the lot wasn't self-created, but the house that is on there today was something that was self-created, and it's not that they bought the house there already. And so that, I think, makes the circumstances different and unique from the two other examples of similar setbacks that have been granted. So for that reason, I don't think that I'm in support of this one. But do we usually have?
If it's really up to the commission's discretion, if you'd like to get more input from the architect, you certainly could.
Okay. Yes, please.
I just want to be clear on behalf of the homeowners. This house was built on spec. They did not custom design it. There was not an architect involved to custom tailor this house to the current homeowners.
Thank you.
Just to be clear.
Okay, thank you. So I will open any other question or any other comments. Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve B22-12 for 12.5 foot rear yard setback.
Second.
Okay.
Carrie.
Before you vote on it, could I recommend that you add a couple of conditions, that the approval of the variance is subject to the plans submitted and subject to the engineering memo? That wasn't listed out, so if we could get that specifically to make sure that all the plans, the variance is based on the plans.
Yeah, further as and consistent with the plans submitted. So,
And the second part, the engineering memo.
and the engineering memo. Thank you.
And was there a second?
Second.
Okay, great. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay.
Nay.
All right. With that, this variance has been approved by the Planning Commission tonight.
6-2.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I think it was 6-2. Yeah.
Okay.
Good, thank you. Okay. Thank you for coming in tonight. Next is our sketch plan. So tonight, Carrie Teague, our Community Development Director, will present for us.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. As mentioned here, before you is a sketch plan proposal located at Southdale. It's for lifetime living. So within the Southdale site, the project would be located in this existing parking field that's located north of the Southdale Southdale Place Apartments, and just east of the recently built Lifetime Fitness facility. The site is guided in our comprehensive plan for community activity center. So within the comprehensive plan, this area is highlighted as one of our more areas that are more conducive to more dense development, in particular in between France and York. The density that's allowed on this site would be up to 150 units an acre. The site's currently zoned planned commercial district, which allows for office uses, retail uses, and apartments as a conditionally permitted use. So what the applicant is proposing here is to construct a 300-unit, 32-story, 400-foot tall luxury apartment building. So as you can see here, the building would be located on a podium, a 3-story podium, and the facility would be connected by a skyway into the existing Lifetime Fitness. Here is a rendering of what the project would look like at night. Again, you can see the podium, and the applicant will go through in more detail the specifics of the building and the site plan, so I'll just give you the high points here and what's required by code. So here is a kind of an aerial shot of the site. The proposal would include some significant green space addition. On the site that existing today is the Metro Transit station located right here. This project would require that to be relocated on the site. So there's pedestrian connections and green space that this all would be open to the public. So public easements established over that green space. Here's a two-dimensional view of the project. Access into the apartment would occur on this level, off of the ring road. The existing drive would maintain. This is adjacent to Southdale. So I mentioned the relocation of the transit station that's located here today. So this is the preliminary recommendation for the relocation. So there's a lot that needs to take place in order to relocate that. There's a current agreement between the city, Simon Properties, the property owner, and Metro Transit. So we need to work out an agreement amongst all of those three parties to relocate that. Those discussions have begun, but with any approval of this project, again, that would need to be relocated. So what this request should a formal application be made, they would need a site plan approval, a building height variance. Currently, the zoning ordinance requires 12 stories and 144 feet. That's the maximum height. A building setback variance to R1 property, and I'll show a graphic that demonstrates that in a minute. A parking stall variance. So the residential development would be code compliant, but in terms of the Southdale itself, they're taking away spaces from Southdale. So they would need a variance for the overall development, overall Southdale development. So currently a parking and traffic study, well, it hasn't quite started yet, but that will be included as part of any formal submission to examine the impacts of this project on all the adjacent roadways and how the parking works. And as I mentioned, the residential use is a conditionally permitted use in this zoning district. So some of the issues for discussion this evening, again, in regard to density, the comprehensive plan allows up to 150 units. Because this is such a large site, 80 acres in total, given the existing apartment units there, the overall density is just 7 units an acre. So there's the density is certainly reasonable for the site. In terms of affordable housing, the applicant is indicating that they would like to do the buy-in amount based on the number of units. Ultimately, that's a decision of the City Council, but the Planning Commission can weigh in with recommendations on that. The building height itself, so again, it's a pretty significant variance to allow up to 32 stories, where the zoning ordinance allows a maximum of 12. Now, within the comprehensive plan and the design experience guidelines, we've always, or the plans anticipate greater height in between France and York. The comp plan and those design guidelines don't put a specific number on what that magical max is. It's really subjective, reviewed on a case-by-case basis. In regard to that setback that I mentioned to R1 properties, so for any building that's over 9 stories tall, the required setback to R1 property needs to be 6 times the height of a building. So the building itself needs a 2,400-foot setback to the nearest R1 property. So this graphic demonstrates that. So again, the building would be located right here. And the distance to the nearest R1 property over in the Cornelia neighborhood would be just over 2,100 feet. So a variance would be needed there. And the closest in the city of Richfield, these R1 properties, just under 900 feet. So another variance. In terms of the parking ramp and liner buildings, so as recommended in the design experience guidelines, the parking would be hidden from the north and east side of the building. This graphic shows that. So again, here's the parking up to 3 levels, and there would be apartments that would shield from the north and the east. This is that public space in front. But this was a concern that was raised in Mick Johnson's memo that was provided to the Planning Commission, is the street typologies of the internal ring road that comes around through here, or at least the existing drive access. So this would be the parking ramp exposed on those sides, of course screened. This demonstrates the tower, the location. So again, as you can see, it is set on a podium that does step in from York and from to the south. So part of Mick's review, he did talk about the 200 by 200 foot blocks that we're trying to achieve in the Southdale district. He had suggested that the site be broken up into 3 smaller blocks with 3 apartments, essentially 3 buildings on the site. Again, the design experience guidelines are recommendations. It's not code. It's just they're intended to get this discussion going as part of the sketch plan. The pedestrian connections. So compared to previous projects at Southdale, where we've been developing the corners with the Southdale 1, the RH on this corner, the Shake Shack on the corner, and the apartments, we've been really trying to get better pedestrian connections from the mall itself outward. This project really does that much better than those previous projects. As you can see, all of the green space that's added with those pedestrian connections out to the perimeter sidewalk of Southdale. So there's quite a vast improvement there. In terms of sustainability, with any formal application, they would need to address the city's sustainability policy. As I mentioned, the traffic and parking study would be needed with any formal request also. Again, the Metro Transit location, we'd need more clarification on that with the formal application. And I mentioned the variances that would be required as part of any formal submittal, and they all really center around the height of the building. So with that, I can stand and answer any questions you may have, and the development team is here to make a presentation as well.
Thank you so much. What questions do we have for Director Teague? Go ahead.
Carrie, perhaps for the rest of the committee too, or commission, what is the height of the Weston compared to this project?
Yeah, I don't know the exact height, but the Weston is 18 stories.
Okay.
So it's, what would that be? 14 stories, less.
And that is, if not the tallest building or one of the two tallest buildings?
It is. You recall the 70th in France project that was recently approved? That will be 24 stories. So
Which
that
we
would
just-
be the tallest.
24.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question about whether Richfield has similar requirements related to height and the proximity to R1, and would any variance be required, or what does that partnership look like for something like this?
Yeah, I have not seen that type of ordinance in other cities. Not saying it's not out there, but I don't believe Richfield has something like that. There was a project that went through a number of years ago. Let's see if I have a graphic. Well, it's this purple area. It's the Onyx that's 4 to 5, maybe it's 5 stories. There was a lot of concern with the city of Richfield with that project. And at that time, staff drove around and took pictures of existing Richfield projects and their proximity to R1 districts. And there is a building, an apartment building that was somewhat recently built at 66th and Lyndale. It's an apartment complex that's quite tall. I don't know the exact number of stories, but it's right across the street from single-family homes. We can certainly provide that information as part of any formal application to get more clarity on it.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if there was any official partnership or sign-off that we had to do with the city of Richfield, but it doesn't sound like there is.
Correct. I have received some feedback from Richfield residents, so there is some concern over the height.
Thank you. Other questions for Director Teague before we hand it over to our other presenters? Go ahead.
For the public easement for green space, is that, it seems like this, we don't really create new streets anymore and new public spaces. It's this sort of hybrid public-private thing. So is that something that the developer or the owner of the property still has control over?
Well, I would view this as similar to some of our recent projects, 70th in France as an example, that public park that's within that project. There would be an easement in favor of the public using that space, but they would still maintain ownership.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Teague. Quick question, is this Southdale, the retail that's there, is it anticipated that that will stay?
At this time, that's my understanding, yes, it would stay.
All right, any last questions for Director Teague? Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
Just a quick question. With the parking that's right outside the building, is that temporary parking, you would say, or is that permanent? You could, residents could stay there indefinitely, or is it just for temporary dropping off, picking up, that kind of thing?
Yeah, are you referring to this area right here?
Yes, I think that's the only space. Yep.
Yeah, so I haven't had any discussions in detail about how that would be used, if there would be some hours restriction. So that might be a good question for the applicant, how they're anticipating using that space. Kind of gives the impression here that that would be spaces designated for mall use.
Okay.
But we'd want clarity on that as part of any formal application, certainly.
Commissioner Bennett.
Although it likely won't impact this project, but understanding that the residential use is a conditionally permitted one for this type of zoning, where we're really hoping to capitalize on much more intensity. Are there other uses that would be conditionally permitted or are just granted as part of being in this zoning? Like if they were to do, to match like some sort of retail component on a part of the main level or some other thing, I mean, does that comply? And are there other things that just would be helpful to understand what other things would need to be granted as part of this if it were to tweak a little bit?
Yep, that's a good question. If they were to add retail here, that would simply be a permitted use. So we would have to, it would change the parking calculation. So that would be the main thing to consider. Would there be enough parking and how that factors into whatever the parking variance is. But commercial and office, those are all uses that are simply permitted in this district.
All right, so with that, I would love to welcome our presenters tonight.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, we're really excited to be here tonight. I'm Eric Paget, Director of Mixed Use Real Estate at Lifetime, and really head up the Lifetime Living platform. You know, we've been talking about this for a couple years, and we're really excited to share our plans with you tonight. So in 2019, we opened our brand new athletic resort and Lifetime work facilities. There was a little pandemic that happened in there, but we've been super pleased with our results, and we thank you for welcoming us into your community. It's it's really fun to walk through those buildings and see the amount of activity, and all really focused on health and wellness, and that was our vision. But also part of our vision was to connect the whole healthy village concept. When we opened in 2019, we really talked about a healthy village. And really, how do you develop an iconic healthy village in a site like Southdale? So we're here tonight as our first step really in the process, the sketch plan process. We're not asking for approval. We really want to get your feedback to help us further our design process. There's a lot of stakeholders involved. There's different agencies, there's property owners, there's the county, there's Lifetime. There's a lot of folks that go into us developing an iconic location. And this is part of our process, right, too. We want to get the feedback so we can develop something together that we can build. But I think we can all agree redeveloping an existing underutilized surface parking lot sounds like a great idea. So let me give you a little color into how we got there. So the first question is, what is Lifetime Living? So Lifetime has developed this concept. We now have a location open in Miami, and we're about ready to open one in Las Vegas here in the next couple of weeks. But it's really a concept about designing for healthy living. So everything that we talk about in our designs and even our operation model is a curated living experience for our residents. And it's all about health and wellness. But health and wellness is not just about working out. It's about the community, the social connections. It's having all the barriers removed from your life that give you back time, like traffic and et cetera, to give you back time to focus on your health. So to be clear, all of our residents in a Lifetime Living project automatically include a membership into Lifetime, and that's Lifetime across the nation. So when we talk about that, the connections that we make with the Lifetime Club, again, it's not just the physical connections, it's also the social connections. So we focus on concierge. In fact, our team in our clubs right now, they're actually concierge staff. And they're not salespeople, they're concierge services. And we extend that into the Lifetime Living platform to make it really feel like it's a hospitality resort type feeling. And really about the community. They get access to the athletic resort, but we also have dedicated amenities in the building that serve for the residents. So they have that private environment, their home, such as bike parking, meditation areas, private dining areas, dog spa, parking for the residents. Again, everything is really focused on creating that healthy way of life. But it's also a retreat. So when we talk about hospitality, we want you to feel like when you come home to your home in a Lifetime Living project, it's the highest quality of fit and finish. It feels like a condo, but it is for rent. And it's really all focused around the details of how do you create healthy living. So details like we do all wood plank flooring because there's less allergens than carpet. We do healthy we have larger kitchen islands for healthy food prep. Everything is really focused on around health and wellness. So when we got to really into the design process here, we did want to really focus on a lot of items. I talked a little bit about the stakeholders. There is a lot of things about the Southdale design guidelines that we've been considering and as our guide to how we wanted to redevelop the site. There's items about how do we get the health and wellness outside of the building? How do we make those pedestrian connections? How do we give access to bikes? How do we create green space that we can activate in the shopping mall parking lot that really becomes an amenity for all of us? So we've been really focused on all of that, and really the end game for us is Lifetime is a place for everyone. Everyone who wants to focus their health journey, health and wellness journey, we want them to do that with us. So this is the site. As you can see, the Lifetime Work and Lifetime Athletic Resort buildings are located here. The site we're really focused on is located here. So when we first started focusing on how do we site the building, we really focused on connections. Connections to the athletic resort, connections to the street network, connections to the pedestrian network. And then I know it's, one of the challenges always with Southdale has been the ring road system and the confusion between the one-way and two-way and how it starts and stops. And so the yellow highlighted areas around this is our proposed way to really create this back into a two-way ring road system throughout that area. Secondly, we focused on the Southdale Design Guidelines, the guiding principle of this 200-foot by 200-foot grid network. And to create that grid network in a site that has existing buildings, existing tenants, with long-term leases in the mall, it's really hard to scrape the canvas clean and start over with that. So we focus really on how do we introduce the grid network into this with the existing access points. And so one of the key elements that we focused on here was how do we get this access to become that grid network. We've also focused on, and our design team will talk through some of the other things, pedestrian connections and creating that grid, not only just vehicular traffic, but also pedestrian connections through here. Thirdly, our high priority was how do we create that green space, that public realm that the design guidelines really talk about. And what's interesting, when we introduced this grid network, it had a huge impact on the operations of the Metro Transit bus station. It actually really eliminated its ability to operate. But when we started investigating and having the conversations with Metro Transit, it was, we're planning the E line, and when you think about the circulation through the mall, it was creating a lot more travel time and a lot more confusion. And so we presented this option with our partners at Simon to move it up to the 66th Street, which is right where the connection comes in through Fairview. And it really made a lot of sense to Metro Transit. There's a lot of steps to take in there, but we're actually providing new facility, more park and ride spaces, better connections, better ability for them to do the queuing that they want to do as part of that, the BRT line. So really the result of all this is the way we got to our site plan that shows today. And I'll introduce Christine Picard from ESG, and she'll talk through a lot of our building design elements. But again, I really look forward to the questions tonight and your feedback as we start this process.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric.
I'm Christine Picard. I am an architect and a partner at ESG. We've partnered with the City of Edina and a number of other developers on multifamily housing developments across the city. So we're excited to be here to present this one at Southdale. I'm personally really excited because as we've been thinking about a lot as a city, what the future of malls and properties like Southdale will become, this is a really good opportunity for us to identify an area that could desperately use it. So with that, I'll just get into the localized site. So Eric did a really good job of talking about how we got to kind of the area today. Obviously, the guidelines that we're following are a vision for kind of a master plan of this entire development over time. What we're looking at is what we can do with our one little part of this. I think this is a pretty high-profile site with it being right off that York Avenue exit, entrance into this property. I think we are attempting to do what we can to implement that grid system and that idea of breaking this up while also planning for the future and what might happen around the development. So we'll just get kind of into the site itself. So this is a localized site that we're talking about outside of some of the modifications to the ring road and the transit relocation. As you can see, it is a heavily hardscaped surface parking lot. It's actually depressed down into the mall property. As you get closer to the mall property, it hits that floodplain level, so there's some kind of complications or considerations with the site there. And it's facing kind of this inner part of the mall that is the side yard to two major box retailers. So when we started planning for this, at one point we were looking at, okay, how can we make this building as efficient as possible? You know, could we just do a simple box and what would that look like on the site? And we oriented it a couple different ways and then just really felt that it was the right thing to do to try to find a better way to shape the building so it would nest into that existing built structure and not take up any more of this triangular site area than it needed to, providing more front yard to the building, if you will. So as we fast forward to kind of our site plan, that's how you can see the shape of the building. You see it's kind of got a cant to it. It's nested into those big box retailers adjacent to it. It maintains the service drives that exist today along the mall property and along the side yard of the Lifetime Club. Those are some of the things that Carrie's given you as food for thought. We can talk about what that kind of experience looks and feels like. But again, pulling that building in allowed us to have this network of greenscape, and it also allowed us to make a better connection to that York entrance. So the comp plan talks, the design guidelines talk a lot about this 200 by 200 grid, and I think we'll just kind of give you an idea of what this looks like. So our sites are, these parcels are bigger than 200 by 200, but what they do a little bit better than the example that was in the AFO report is it allows for more usable area. It doesn't compartmentalize some of these triangular sites to being nothing more than tiny little pockets that wouldn't be very developable or usable by the community. I think the emphasis on having a lot of greenscape in the front of this building is with the city and the neighboring communities in mind. They are offering a number of amenities here. We're talking about options for landscaping. Right now, we are looking at doing all of the stormwater management in tanks below grade, but that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be strategies for bioswales or some other sustainability initiatives. The permeability of this site is increased vastly by what we're doing here. Again, trying to create that greenscape in the front yard, tucking the parking and some of the utilitarian functions of the site in the back. I think, Commissioner, you had asked a question about the parking. I'll just go back to that and talk about that a little bit. So right now, it's proposed that you come in off of York. There is a primary entrance for the residential parking off of that ring road, and then there's also mall access. With there being a mall entry back here, we felt it was important to provide at least some surface parking back here for anybody that's a patron and actually coming this way. There is also a portion of the parking structure that is dedicated to public parking. We're working on the numbers. That'll come with the traffic report. I think our goal is to right-size this so that it makes sense. It's supporting the initiatives of the residents that would live there. I think we're targeting a 1.5 stall for each unit, and then right-sizing the underutilized commercial parking that's there today. All in all, I think with the way that the entire master plan for Southdale shook out, I think we have 5960 stalls today, and with the final plan as it's proposed, there would be 5975. So a hair more than there is right now with the added density of the residential, but again, right sizing for the commercial use. All stuff that'll come out in that traffic report, as I'm sure some of these ring road modifications and other things will too, so more to come on that. One of the things that we're doing with the building is we're tucking the parking structure in the rear, and then we're fully lining all outward facing facades with active liner. These are walk-up dwelling units. They could be converted to two-story spaces if they needed to be. There's a large lobby right on the corner of York, big volume, glassy, a lot of transparency, and then liner units along the ring road facing York Avenue as well. Okay. Let me just get into the site. So as Eric had mentioned, it was on the forefront of our mind. This site is nested right in the center of Southdale, north-south. We're very aware that there are city goals and objectives to try to keep that connection happening from the north side to the south side, as with providing permeability to all the residents that live just to the east of this property. So this is an example of the modifications that are being made or the introduction of roadways. So this is focused on, you know, how vehicles might traverse the site, or the infrastructure, if you will. And then taking that one step further, we've layered in a whole hybrid network of pedestrian connections. And here's where you can start to see connecting back to One Southdale, connecting up York to the north side of the site, providing and maintaining all of the access points for all the residents coming from the east into the mall, into their Lifetime Club, into the upper level, if you will. There's a bit of a grade change. Our building starts to become a whole level lower down here than the big box retailer is up here. So should that become a grocer or something else, there's means for the residents to still be and maintain their connections. Okay, so getting a little into the design and the orientation of the building. Again, it was really important to us that we kind of create a continuum. The Lifetime work is connected to the Lifetime Fitness Center, and we're looking for means of kind of creating that facade and mirroring the scale of these existing buildings with the podium and then into the tower. So you can kind of see that connection or that facade continuation. And then, as Carrie pointed out, you can see the vast amount of green space that's in front of this building. Looking at it a little bit closer, you can see kind of the replication of materials. So again, trying to fit the podium of this building into the fabric of the existing conditions, both in scale and in materials. Design guidelines very clearly call out for quality materials at the base of the building. Stone, brick, low maintenance materials. That's precisely what's proposed for the base of this building. Then they talk about, as it gets up above 60 feet, going to things that are more transparent, glass, metals, things that we're proposing for the tower as well. Scale-wise, as we're looking at kind of the built form guidelines, there is a requirement or a guideline to step buildings back and to address buildings separately when they hit that 60-foot height. Our podium right now is generally about 35 to 40 feet, and then there's a little bit on this corner here where we're starting to replicate the scale of the club, where it's still just under 60 feet. So just to give you a scale for reference, the podium is fitting very nicely into those form requirements. You can see emphasis on the attention to detail on the roof structures, looking for decorative ballast, possibly some green roof solutions, a lot of thought process both on sustainability and what the experience is as you're looking down on these buildings from the high-rise tower. Just to kind of give you kind of an experience of what it's like down at the pedestrian scale, the connectivity is extremely important. The design guidelines also talk about de-emphasizing vehicular traffic. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how the pedestrian experience would work on this site and how they might be able to traverse the site while still giving this building a regal front yard, if you will. So you can see the pedestrian street exhibited here. This is a perfect example of decent urban planning strategies where you're attempting to create transitions from what is public to what is private through a series of different kind of changes. Whether or not this is elevated, whether or not there's walls to it, whether or not it becomes a lot more fluid, that's all going to be part of our design process. But the idea being that there's a means for the public to connect straight through this site at the front door of this building, while also providing walk-up dwelling units with their own outdoor patios and porches and terraces as well. So moving around the building, you can see the grand drop-off. Again, we thought a lot about what we wanted to do with the base of the building. So we've got a podium that wraps around. We did make the architectural move to erode that podium and to bring the transparency of the tower down to the footprint. It makes for a really grand entrance. There's a porch-covered drop-off, and I think there's an opportunity for us to have some outdoor courtyard space, and I just think it makes kind of a good impression. Looking at this site and just thinking about vehicular traffic and how we have a drop-off, it's becoming more and more important in multifamily buildings to address people getting picked up and dropped off with rideshare. It's just becoming kind of more forefront of our minds as we start developing these buildings. But we have been having a lot of conversations about what this drop-off wants to be, and I think we're headed in the direction of creating an UNRF condition where there might be some temporary parking for potential residents and a drop-off situation. But should there be a need or a desire to have a larger event space, that can be deactivated, and we can default to the secondary entrance points of the building for those functional pieces and open this whole space up, green space and hardscape for events. Just a thought. And then moving around, this is the York-facing side, where again, we have that secondary entrance. We also have the walk-up units, again, fully lined on all faces of the outward-facing buildings. This is a great example of where you can start to see that tower is stepped back off the York-facing facade. It's stepped back 10 feet, I want to say about 10 feet here and maybe 30 feet at the deepest point. But again, trying to create kind of pedestrian scale as it's facing that major right-of-way. The parkland, I kind of mentioned it's a work in progress. I think we'll think a lot about what this wants to be as we start shaping up the plan. One of the goals is to create public space for sure, a variety of public spaces at that. I think we're going to be looking at natural plantings. I think we're going to be looking at stormwater management solutions. We want it to be highly usable. We want it to be an amenity for the entire community. We also are going to look at strategies for landscaping, creating a landscaping buffer that kind of conceals that exposed parking structure that's there today too. Looking at kind of the building form, this is kind of a view of the building as it comes together. You can again kind of see how the relationship with the tower and the podium are working together. It was important to us to not have a simple flat glass facade to this building. We're looking for opportunities to create movement in the facade. So you can see that there's some recessed balconies, there's some balconies on the edges of the building, there's some plane changes. We've been talking a lot about glazing strategies, perhaps having two different types of glazing to really emphasize kind of some of the ribbons around this building and recesses. There's some decorative architectural fins. We'll get into the unit planning and how to make these residential dwelling units from the inside feel as appropriate as they are beautiful from the outside. I think that'll be the balancing act between metal panel and glass, but those are some of the things that we're starting to look at. And then as you can kind of see, I think one of our next slides zooms in on this a little bit more, but we've got these moments on the northeast side of the building and the southwest side of the building, or sorry, I think I did that wrong. Yes, no, that's right. Where we're creating these 2-story penthouse units. It's again just trying to break up the building so that if you're looking at it from this angle, there's some sort of relief in the entire height. As you turn around or you're experiencing the building from, say, the fitness center, amenity terrace, you're experiencing that as well. So I got a view of kind of what that looks like. I think one of our goals is going to be to kind of find the right mix for an architectural metal panel that can really be illuminated and kind of transpire up the building and create some movement. So that's kind of one of the initiatives here. And then finally, looking at the top of the building, we're proposing a 2-story volume sky lounge with a cap to the building, really just looking for a great way to terminate the top of this really monumental tower with an outdoor terrace as well. So again, taking advantage of the fact that we're creating this taller building for a luxury client with the views of the city. And with that, I'm here for questions. And to Eric's point, we really want your feedback. We want to know what's important to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I will ask the commission to start with questions, and then we will definitely get into all of the wonderful comments I'm sure they have. But we will get kicked off with Commissioner Alkire.
Thanks for the presentation. It's a amazing looking building. I guess the first question that I have for you is, are you planning anything, or would you consider anything that would have, on the first floor principally, that would be a public resource that would draw people who are not residents or not members of Lifetime Work or Lifetime Fitness to that destination?
Appreciate the question, Commissioner. We can certainly look at it. We haven't really talked about that at this point.
Okay, thanks.
And Commissioner Padilla.
As long as you're up, Eric, thank you both for the presentation. Eric, you mentioned that this is for everyone, that you are interested in building an iconic, healthy village. So I would like you to address, if you would, inclusion or exclusion of children. We saw one picture, but I didn't hear anything about children, daycare facilities, amenities that got mentioned. If you would address the inclusion of everyone.
Sure. Anybody can rent at a Lifetime Living project. I'm not sure if you've been into our Lifetime Athletic Resort, but we do have Kids Academy as part of our services. So if you're a member at Lifetime, you can drop your kid off for 3 hours a day while you do your workout, while you have lunch, while you do run errands, something like that. That is part of our offering at Lifetime. So that would be included in the membership along with your rent.
You also emphasized the point that this is a holistic approach to a healthy lifestyle, and work, play, all that comes together. So it seems to me that 540 parking spaces for 300 units, considering that you're trying to have everything encompassed together, might be a lot. And I don't know whether or not some other people might want to address that as well. I don't know if you want to address how you came up with that, or how, if...
Sure. Madam, the parking count is still in flux. It's still early design process. It's at this standpoint. Our goal for the residential component of the project is to deliver about 1.5 spaces per unit. So that's about 450 stalls if we did 300 units. Inclusive in that 540 parking spaces is some of the surface parking that's in front of the building for short-term, where people come in to lease, for package drop-off, for a guest to come visit you at your home. But we also are including parking stalls in the structure for the mall. So replacing some of the parking spaces that we're removing, that's also included in that 540 parking spaces. So it's really for the residential component, it's about 450 stalls that we're planning.
Thank you. And my last question. Dr. Teague mentioned that your plan would be to contribute about $100,000 a unit into the affordable housing area that would be yet to be built. My thought is, in terms of affordable housing, that it would be great to have affordable housing near where there's a transit hub. So I don't know how you feel about incorporating affordable housing into it. I mean, not only is there be a transit hub right there, but we have very large employers, just to the north. So if you could speak to the potential of either including it or making some adjacent, or I don't know if that's a question for Dr. Teague as well.
Thank you. We've had actually quite a few discussions with staff and trying to understand how we incorporate that appropriately in our building. We certainly agree that affordable housing is a key component to the city, and it is also for Simon and for Lifetime. We haven't figured out the right solution yet. It's early in our process. I don't disagree. I think there was an idea from staff at one point is, as we relocate the transit center, is there a great opportunity to include that in the transit center relocation? That's complex. And so to answer really the question, we don't know yet, right? We're just not there yet. As we work through our design process, well, it'll certainly be a consideration, but we just don't know yet.
Thanks very much.
Commissioner Olson. Oh, just kidding. Commissioner Smith?
Sure. Thank you. Great presentation, Eric and Christina. It's a very beautiful building. I could see that. I just want to kind of understand a bit more of your history of these types of buildings and where you've done it before. So, in your presentation, you talk about iconic. I kind of heard that word. I know that this Lifetime is a diamond level Lifetime, which means it's like one of the top level Lifetimes, and I'm glad it's in Edina. And then you also mentioned that you might have built this already in Miami and Las Vegas, or you're about to do that. Could you just talk more about where you've done buildings of this size and design before? And I know, Miami and Las Vegas is very different than Edina, but tell us more about your approach in those locations and what's been the response.
Yeah, so Coral Gables opened last year in June of 2021. It is our first Lifetime Living location. In that building, it's a 495 unit project. It is not a high rise, but I think it's 12 stories. We also have a club and Lifetime Work that are vertically integrated into that building. We were not the builder of that project. So we are a tenant in that building, but we're also the operator. So this was our first real test into what that is. And it's been a glowing success. So 495 units, we were leasing on average 50 units a month, which outperforms anything we've seen in the market. We actually stabilized that project in 11 months. Stabilized means 95% occupancy. And right now we're actually going through renewals, right? So the renewal process in multifamily, it's typically you have 40 to 50% of folks renew. We're averaging over 70% of our people are renewing to stay there. But what's really cool to us is what our marketing strategy really around that was people know Lifetime, right? They trust us. And we have 30% of our folks who are living in Coral Gables, Miami, are actually people from the Northeast, right? And they wanted a second home, or they wanted their son or daughter who goes to the University of Miami, they wanted them to live in Lifetime Living versus student housing or some apartment off site, because they trust Lifetime. And I think that's an important thing as we're learning through our process. We also just opened a project in One Chicago. So One Chicago, River North area. It's a 900-foot tall skyscraper. There's 800. It's the 5th largest building in Chicago now. It opened in March of this year. We have a 130,000 square foot club within that building. And then all of the residents, there's 900 units in that project, are members of Lifetime. So it's not technically Lifetime operated from the residential standpoint. But if you talk to the developer there, and we'd love to take you there to see it, it's an iconic project. That developer approached us and said, we need you as our amenity. We need you as our operator. And they're having great success in their lease up. And what the interesting thing, again, I talk about the connectivity. So a resident, all those residents who live there, they ride the elevator down, they go, they can use the club, they can go there for breakfast, they can go to the chiropractor there, they can have their kids academy services there. And what we're finding is those residents use our club 2.5 times a day. Right? So they're entering into our club 2.5 times a day. An average member is 4 to 5 times a week, and that's really high in our industry. But again, it's that connectivity that we're creating with the living into our amenities, and we're very proud of that. So excited about that. Our Las Vegas project opened in a couple weeks. We've got great demand. It's not a skyscraper. It's a low-rise, 5-story building. It's in our parking lot of our club that we opened a couple years ago. And again, the demand is crazy to get into the door. So we have people who are waiting to sign leases, and we're just not taking them all yet. So it's really a great story, and we really believe in that curated living experience of what we're trying to create.
Can I just throw one question on top of that? So then kind of understanding the locations that you've picked to date, some you've picked, some have been reached out to. What is it about this site in Edina that is right for Lifetime?
Yeah. So Edina has been a great market for us, right? Our club is, from a membership standpoint, from how well we've been received with our members, it's our home iconic project. When we bring development partners from all over the United States who want to do a Lifetime or a Lifetime Living in their project, we bring them to Edina. It has become our new model moving forward. And we really hear from our members, I really want to live at a Lifetime Living project. How do I get into a Lifetime Living project? Our demographic here knows us, they trust us, and we think that being our home market, that it's really a raving success opportunity for us.
Oh, sure. Good. So question around safety a little bit. I don't have as much information about fire suppression systems in high rises, but just tell us a little bit more. We've heard about the Bronx fire. That was pretty bad, 18 stories. This one is going to be 32 stories. I'm not sure if our Edina fire stations are optimized to solve problems of that kind of height. But tell us more about the work that your company has done with this building to help, I guess, reduce the issue of if there's a fire mid-level, there's no place to go down if it's coming up, right? You have to go up on the roof. And how do you get people off of that? So tell us more about how you think about safety in this building with such a tall building in this neighborhood.
I'm going to let one of my design experts respond to that, if that's okay. Sorry, Kristen.
I had a feeling that was coming to me. Okay, so with high-rise buildings, I think one of the things, and as we're thinking about just even the height of this building, the building code has a threshold, and you become a super high-rise when your roof is above 420 feet. So strategically, this building is not exceeding that threshold. So it's under normal building code for high-rise. We've done ESG, several buildings under this high-rise code all across the cities. We're also doing one in Chicago right now that's 34 stories. So we're just paying very close attention to what those requirements entail. And it requires a fire service elevator. It requires a stair that opens up into that elevator core. It requires suppression systems. And as I can say from past experiences and projects in the city of Edina, your building department is not the easiest to get through. They are very diligent, as is your fire marshal. I think it's great. So we have a lot of those conversations really early on about all of these strategies. When you're designing a building of this scale, you can't afford to have things like that be an afterthought. So I would say, as soon as entitlement approvals, that's the very next meeting that we have is, what are we doing here? What are we missing? How are you entering the building? Where do you want the fire command room? What kind of access and visibility do you want from the outside? How do you want to address the units? How are we traversing the parking? I mean, all of those conversations that are pretty stealthy. Does that help?
So if I were to summarize, you would say that you work extensively with the Edina Fire Marshal, that team. Is there anything that they've asked that this building have as part of a requirement, or anything else in addition to what you just shared that they've probably asked for?
No, well, we haven't started conversations on this project. Obviously, this is our first step in this process, but I would say some of the things that we talk about, like I said, where the fire command room is within the building, how visible it is, whether or not it has an exterior connection, that I would anticipate that being part of the conversation. I think that, high-rise code is pretty well mapped out. I mean, luminescent markings and, all of the considerations that are built into the code really kind of appease. I mean, they're looking out for fire safety in the forefront of design. So those requirements, I can't think of anything extremely unique that we've been asked that we haven't been thinking about day one. I just think it's the first conversation. We haven't gotten into utility design yet, and I know that there's going to be some conversations with the city that we've even already started with Carrie and Chad that are talking about utilities and what needs to be upgraded for infrastructure just to serve this property and this development. So that's a whole nother layer that we've just started to scratch the surface.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. One last question, and then I'll pass it off here to Eric. Just a question on the height. This says 300 units. Just curious on why 300 units versus your Las Vegas location. It was, I think, 12 stories tall. What's driving the volume of units? If you just share more about that, maybe economic conversation or discussion on the unit volume.
Yeah, certainly. When we start an opportunity like this, we first start with a market study. What does the market look like? Who are you going after as a tenant or as a resident? And then that really forms our economic considerations, right? And so when we started this process, the 400-foot tall building, it's really a function of how do we create that elegant, designed, and kind of living features of the building. So in this project, we have 10 units per floor is kind of what we're focused on. And that feels like a luxury type project. And we also take into considerations from a constructability standpoint. So, and the floor plates that we've designed are what our contractors are saying that are the most efficient from a building standpoint. How do you sequence this? How do you make it safe? and et cetera. So all of those considerations really go back to what's the market, right? And so our strong belief in how we drive this premium product is that 300 feels about like the right number of units.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I have been, and I assume we have been, impressed with Lifetime's vision. I mean, I think it's a remarkable trend or whatever, but this design for healthy living is, like I said, nothing short of remarkable. I hope you have great success with it. I come back to Mick Johnson is kind of is going to be coming up, well, as you're probably well aware of his memo, and he's been very influential in the commission with quite an extensive history, and certainly was at the beginning of creating the Southdale guidelines. And he had some tough comments in his memo, and I commend your efforts to respond to them, but I was stuck with his comment that it's a very inward kind of facing project, and the guidelines are about inclusivity with connecting on the street level and all those sort of things, and that's what I feel is missing. I think it's absolutely, living there will be wonderful in the amenities, but what we're looking at is how does it tie in to the rest of that, and the green space I think is a great component of that, and he comes back to this grid program. I mean, and I understand that you are dealing with sizable fixed buildings, and it'd be great if we were, maybe not for Simon, but if we were starting with a nice flat parking lot and we could lay it out. I mean, that would be, yeah. But you're working with what's there, and that was my takeaway, is that connection outside. And I'm just going to throw I was on the commission when we sat through the Estelle project, which was another proposed, I think, luxury high-rise. Where it didn't go anywhere, it was on the wrong side of France Avenue, impacted the community. I think the density can work. It's where it can and should probably happen, so I don't think that's going to be the issue. But certainly, there's going to have to be a community outreach, so you don't get overwhelmed with that combined. And this is your business, but that's another thing. But I don't, the height of that building, there's a certain shock when you see it. It is beautiful, but it's got a real wow reaction when you see that. And I'm coming around to it, but and I don't know that 32 stories is too much, but it's what I'm trying to absorb.
Understood.
So,
understood.
Thank you. That's what I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Strauss. Let's continue with comments. I don't know. Commissioner Bennett, please.
I'll just start with a question. Yeah, thank you. It's hard not to smile and get excited, just as we can tell you guys are excited. And I think we all know that whatever ends up happening here is going to be more successful than you can even think. So I'm excited for I'll share more of that in the comments, but I guess most of the questions I had have been answered, but one that kind of lingers is the creativity you're bringing to this project and this concept in this area is just well received, but what are other elements that you're considering that we're not seeing here, or that you've toyed with, or you're thinking, could this work in here? I mean, you mentioned a grocer nearby, maybe in the future. What other creative ideas are not necessarily shown, but maybe on the table, or things that you've thought of that would maybe spark some more interest from our standpoint?
Thanks, Commissioner. This is iteration Z, so we have thought about a lot of things. It comes back to, and why we haven't presented something to date is, how do we dial in all that right recipe, right? So we've talked about how do you connect the whole roof structure of the existing club all the way over, right? And the details around that. We've studied different forms of the tower buildings. Iteration Z is probably an understatement for our design team. But again, what it comes back to is in the ideas about connectivity, right? We do think this becomes a real catalyst for future development opportunities. I know there are certain folks that are circling, waiting for us to put a shovel in the ground to make some of those commitments, and that's really exciting. But I think when I step back and really think about what I would call the gateway into Southdale off of York Avenue, creating that public park, that realm, that front yard space, I get really excited about that, right? And it becomes a community asset that really the private community is taking care of. We're maintaining it. We're making sure it's programmed. We want that space to be active, right? Whether we have yoga classes out there or whether we have, other fitness opportunities that we use that space for. But again, it's open to the public. And I think that gateway concept into Southdale will really be impactful to the city.
Thanks. I guess, one of the things I was maybe hoping to hear was kind of, toward Commissioner Strauss's comment as well as Commissioner Elkire of what are some of the other uses that could be combined in some portion of this concept, like the floor, the main level, as well as that inclusivity, because what you're talking about, I totally get excited for that too, but what I'm not seeing is what is the draw for someone who's not living in this village or using it. And so, and then also, I guess part of the question, but also comments, is, this is all summertime, beautiful pictures. So, winter yoga sounds nice, but, what other things are being considered? And if not, I guess we'd encourage it to be. But I'm looking more for some of those ideas of more of the external engagement factor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we can certainly come up with some ideas. We've talked about, do you activate that lobby space with a coffee shop or except the challenge becomes parking, right? And how do you access that? Now, pedestrian connectivity is important, but as we talked about just the other day, it was like we have a cafe in our club, right? And to create another kind of location that people would walk to probably doesn't make a lot of sense for our business, but maybe there are other opportunities within the building that we could look at.
Certainly. Thank you.
Sure.
I just want to add one kind of quick general thought. I mean, the way that mixed report is written, it's responding to this housing development and the fact that it's exclusively a housing development. I just want to point out, one, Southdale is not providing a number of amenities. This is doing more than your average housing development would with just the sitescape alone. But on top of that, it really should be thought of as the phase 2 of a larger mixed-use development. And when you start thinking about that, it starts answering the question of how it's appealing to, families with children and how it's appealing to other members of the community. And as much as the residents of this building might be exclusive to the residential component of the building, bringing 300 units of, luxury living to this development supports any future daily services and commercial users that can go into any of the Southdale areas that are unoccupied right now. Case in point, the retail component directly adjacent to this. So I just, while I, understood maybe what Mick was trying to say in his report, if you think about it differently, it really is a mixed-use development and densifying an area that's going to draw support for future residents. In addition, the way that the site is laid out, it's encouraging development to the north of the site as opposed to, chipping away at the peripheral of this campus, if you will, as has been done to date. So I think those are two pieces to think about in maybe the way that you think about this development a little bit differently. Yeah. Sorry, I'll give that back.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. Full disclosure, I live at 1 Southdale, and I am a member of your club.
Thank you.
I just have a series of comments because I'm torn on this one because I could see myself living there. My first comment just would be the affordability piece. If you could just maybe reconsider if there's any element. I think when you're talking about inclusivity and luxury living, there are so many luxury apartments around the Southdale area that we're just saturated, and the rents are incredibly high. And I just think it would be a shame not to allow, a more diverse population to take advantage of a wonderful project like this. I think the traffic study I'm extremely anxious for. It is a little bit like the Wild West out there, especially the gym goers coming and going before and after work. You got to be careful. I walk my dog around there. And I don't know if this is a you thing or a Simon thing, but maybe some traffic calming, if you could maybe address that in the traffic study, that not just how is the traffic going to flow, but what are some of the traffic calming mechanisms that you can put in around that to slow down? Because people, they book when they're going around, including myself at times. So, and then my comments about the building itself, I am really torn because it is a beautiful building and it's exciting and it's I saw it at first and I was like, sign me up, I want to live there. Parts of me feel a little bit like there's some missed opportunities there as far as pushing a little bit to the streets and getting that sort of the eyes, that internal facing comment really sort of resonated with me, that it does feel really like if you live there and you belong to the club, you're all in. But if you don't, if you're not in that bubble, you're excluded. I can't believe I'm going to say this because I'm pro-density. I wonder a little bit if it's a little too tall for the site. That I don't think would be a deal breaker for me, but maybe breaking it up into two separate buildings. The parking structure, if as you move forward, the crime around that area, I feel like the way it routes, where the Hennepin County Center is and the vacant Herbergers, I feel like with that parking and a tall story, any SEPTED, the crime prevention through environmental design, things that could be incorporated around the parking structure, because I feel like that could maybe be a place where the ne'er-do-wells might want to hang out and get up to mischief, since it'll be a parking spot. And I guess my last comment is the continuous pedestrian experience that Mick talked about. And maybe I'm not going to live at 1 Southdale forever, but it feels a little bit disconnected from that corner, that you've got this residential with 300 plus people living there. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel real connected. The connection that you showed is the existing one, and I know we could walk up and take advantage of the park and things, but and again, that might be more of a Southdale Simon property thing than this project thing. But overall, I love the concept, and I think it's a wonderful concept. I just, my only ask would be maybe not to make it so exclusive that it limits who can enjoy it.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Those are really good comments.
Thanks.
Is this the comment section or the question
Yes,
section?
you can provide any comments.
I just want to echo just one part I think I just heard, which is the size. I think the biggest issue that residents have is how tall this building is and how it stands out amongst in this space, right? Mm-hmm. I know we have some other large buildings, the Westin, we have the US Bank area building that's going to be going up. That's going to be 24 stories, I believe. And so there will be some other buildings to kind of help not make this stand out so much, essentially. But the biggest concern that residents have is how it stands out amongst everything else. And I know Director T kind of showed the distance from the top of the building to the nearest R1 zone and how it kind of conflicts with that currently. is there any opportunity? I know you looked at, this is plan number Z, but maybe plan AA might be something that could maybe break the building up into smaller pieces and share it within that zone. What are some of the constraints that you see with doing that? And is that something that's a possibility in this location?
We can tag team. When we were talking about the height and the density and what this wants to be, I think it's important to note that some of the things that make this a little bit unique compared to some of the other buildings that we've studied and what's kind of driving maybe the height is this particular model is based on larger unit sizes, so it's kind of driving up the amount of massing that it's required to get to 300 dwelling units. Average market rate apartment is probably in the range of 100 or 1,000 square feet per unit. We're more in the 1,300 range for this particular product type. So that's one piece of this. I think the other piece is we're trying very hard to nest this building from a site planning standpoint into the existing context. With that York Avenue entrance, it gets hard to break this up in a number of different ways and still have a substantial amount of density. I would say too, the philosophy here is that this is all congruent. It is kind of a community in and of itself. It's not really a phase one, phase two, just keep going as long as there's demand. It is trying to make that statement. It is trying to say that, you know, it's a presence and it's here and it's, you know, drawing attention to itself. And I think going back to what Director Teague said earlier, as you're looking at the city of Edina, this is where height is appropriate. The comp plan calls for it. The zoning calls for it. Like it is where height would make sense. I do think that the other buildings that are coming up are going to give more context to this. It's not like it's being nested in the middle of a central business district, because that's not what it is. But that doesn't make it inappropriate for Edina. That I guess be my 2 cents. Yes?
Yeah.
Any further comments?
No, I think, you know, just responding to just residents, right? And this is definitely a community kind of environment where we want to live in harmony with the folks around us, right? And they certainly strongly, right, raise a concern about height. We totally love the building. We think it's beautiful. But I would just pay attention to, you know, how could we make it more digestible from what it looks like today. I know we keep using the word iconic and statement and these kind of words, and I think it does that. But I think this city, I think, and you know, you guys could correct me. Not so much about statements, but more practicality. And that's just my only comment there. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Alkire.
Thanks for the presentation. Some of the things I had written down when you were talking about, you kind of set me back a little bit, because there was a very good point that you made just a few moments ago, Christine, about what we may or may not expect from this project compared to what we've already built at 1 Southdale Place. And I have to say, a lot of the things that I have on my list here, you probably can't find at 1 Southdale Place. But I guess I'd ask you to just bear with me and say I'm providing commentary, telling you what I would want to see, not necessarily what I already see in another part of the district, if that's fair. Well, first on affordable housing, it's already been mentioned, I think. You know, it's great to contribute through the buy-in program. That's fantastic. But we'd always prefer to see the units. So if you can find any way to do that in your project model, that's 10 times better for the people who live in this community than contributing to the fund. So I feel like I have to say that just to make sure that that's top of mind for you. Mm-hmm. It's not literally 10 times better, it's just better, okay? When the vision of this project that always comes to mind for me is from the north. So I see the apartment building on the left, and I see the fitness next to it to the west, sort of northwest, and then Lifetime Work. And my view of it in my mind's eye and in some of the pictures you had today, it's a monolith. It's one, for me, in my mind, perceives it as one piece, the podium of the apartment and those other two buildings. It doesn't look like three buildings separated by pedestrian access or, so I have struggled fitting the way we're talking about this project today into the mindset of the 200 by 200. I'm not concerned about the absolute details of the 200 by 200, but the mindset of that, where you have a land use, a gap, a land use, and there's a reason for people to go between and to enjoy going between two, those, the two spaces. So I feel like there's a tension between actually achieving, what we think about when we say 200 by 200 and nesting it into, as you talked about, nesting it into the existing structures, which I see why you did that. But that just creates some challenges when you nest it into, because sometimes you want to talk about that space between the apartment and it's the apartment and the gym as a pedestrian walkway or access to the mall. But at other times we want to call it a service drive. So, and it's hard to have something both be a service drive and a pleasant pedestrian space. And I think, so it's, in some ways it seems like an extension of the mall rather than, building a different sort of space next to the mall. I hope I'm communicating that reasonably clearly. So I guess that's the main thing that I'm reacting to, is that I want us to be making progress in having Southdale be really different, obviously, than it has been for the past 60 years or whatever. And I acknowledge the challenges that you have with the site, but I really would like us to find a way to make more progress, make you successful, and help make our city successful too. Because the way I've seen you talk about, okay, the site is actually, back in the 200 by 200 thing, there's 3 blocks in your property. There's where the apartment is, and then there's the green space out front, and then there's the park at the very north of the lot. Well, to me, the middle section is really just mostly the drive for the apartment. There's really not a whole lot going on there other than that. So I'm struggling with really how to fit the way the project is sorted out right now into that, like I say, 200 by 200 mindset. I'm not personally troubled by the 32 stories, but because I like the density and I like the housing in our community, but it's not going to be easy at all to get support from the community on that, particularly when it's documented that we need nearly a half a mile of setback to the nearest R1 in the east, and we don't have that, or in the west, frankly. So that'll be a struggle, and we'll have to work our way through that and see if you can find a way to navigate that. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. First, question or message for the staff and I guess City Council is in terms of density. I mean, we calculate this as, 15 units per acre or something? And I wonder, 7, okay, oh, even better. And I wonder, that's the property because it's owned, a single owner, but I wonder if we should change that at some point to be for the proposed site or something. But it seems, it's just laughable to call it 15 units per acre. Anyway, that's nothing to do with you guys. So I'm a fan of density, but not just any density, and it has to be the right kind of density. And this doesn't really follow the Southdale guidelines. And, you talk about it being a mixed-use development when you include the mall area. But mixed-use development is not horizontal, okay? That's classic suburban development. Mixed-use development is vertical mixed-use. And so we're not really seeing that here. In fact, even within your development, each building has its own kind of purpose. And then there was discussion about One Southdale Place, but my understanding is that was built before the Southdale guidelines were implemented. Is that true? Right. Or no? Yeah, okay. So that's sort of irrelevant to the discussion because that was built before we had these guidelines. I'm also going to talk to Mick Johnson's comments. He provided 10 pages of comments, which is probably the lengthiest thing he's ever written for the city. And he didn't really mince words at all. And then the project responded to that not by answering any of his questions, but by addressing 10 things to remember and implementing the design experience guidelines, which is sort of like a cheat sheet. So it seems sort of a disingenuous response. Anyway, as Mick points out, this is very much like a gated community. This is fantastic for your business model because this is exactly what you want. But again, as he points out, the city, the residents, and the commission spent 3 years coming up with these guidelines, and that's a huge amount of effort expended on that. And it really seems like zero response to that in this proposal. So I'm actually okay with the height. I think this is the right place for that kind of height. Maybe not 32 stories, maybe a few stories less, but certainly a tower between France and York is the place where you want to have this sort of thing. So in terms of that, I don't have any problem with this at all. The green space, I don't really like green space because it's usually wasted space, especially in suburban contexts. The difference between a park and green space is that park has activities, it has places to do things, it has a hockey rink or a softball field or a plaza or something. It often has amenities nearby like a coffee shop or ice cream parlor or something. And this is just empty grass. So it doesn't really seem like it's addressing anything. So if you could improve that in a future proposal, I think that would make this much stronger. Or even for your brand, if you want to put a vegan restaurant in there. It feels like a buffer to keep outsiders away is what it really feels like. And then in terms of, open to the public, and you gave the example of yoga classes. So, okay, open to the public, does that mean, presumably you have to pay for the yoga classes. You have to be a member of Lifetime to take advantage of the yoga classes. So saying something is open to the public and saying it's a park are two very different things. Commissioner Padilla made some really good points about affordable housing and transit, because it is right by a transit station, a transit center. And so I understand that you're trying to buy out of it, which is allowed under Edina guidelines. But I think having something, again, in a revised proposal would make this a much stronger proposal. Let's see. The pedestrian connections, mostly look like sidewalks. I don't really see how, and there was one diagram where you showed, a dotted line going across or whatever. To walk from one side to the other, you're basically walking across a very pretty building, but it is very much, it's like a glorified big box building. It's whether it's green space or granite, it's just something you have to walk past. And there's nothing to engage the user. There's no shops. There's no public services. There's really nothing to engage anyone in that. So again, if that could be added to that, that would make it much stronger. The grand drop-off is very car-focused. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. The ring road system, and this is part of this whole project, is that the and it's probably more the property owner than this particular project, is that everything here is piecemeal, and so even the ring road system improvements that sound like they might be a good idea is done for the north and east side, and not even the entire east side of the project. It'd be great if there were like a master plan for this place, with streets and walkways and bikeways, and we don't really see that. So again, a plan that at least addresses how that might be would be a big improvement. The design experience guidelines also call for parking liner housing or some other use on all four sides, and that there's no back to a building, and this doesn't really address that at all. So basically, in conclusion, I'd like to say that in terms of density and height, or near that height, I think this is the perfect place for this sort of building. But I think I would be in support of it in a future project only if it was integrated more within the Southdale district, and the guidelines that Mick mentions in great detail are somehow addressed in a future project. If there's any place in Edina where a tower belongs, it's between France and York Avenues. But I do think it would be much improved if there's an intention to make this a truly mixed use in a vertical way, small block, welcoming to all. And if that isn't done, then I think it needs to be reduced in scale. Thank you.
Commissioner Padilla, would you like to add any more comments?
I would just summarize my concerns are inclusivity, whether that be, most importantly, the affordable housing aspect, but also the greater community. I think that this is insular and not as welcoming as the community would like it to be. So I would say inclusivity, more inclusivity.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation tonight. It's, for me, really exciting to see the continued evolution of this entire space. I love the transformation that has happened, and it's really good to see that continue. I actually really like the amount of green space, but I do also hear Commissioner Miranda, and it doesn't feel like a park. I don't think that, I'm 8 blocks away from here. I can't see me bringing my kids over there to play. And so I think it's really it's green space, but it's not necessarily the goal of green space that I like to see. I think overall, echoing a lot of the other comments, but it's not broken up enough for me, especially when you think about that long wall around what I think I've heard referred to as the back. There shouldn't really be a back. It does feel like there's one side to this development, but even just the nature of the circular nature of Southdale as a whole, there's not really a back. And so think about how can we, could there be 2 potentially a little bit shorter buildings that are breaking that up a little bit more, thinking about more of that, how is it referred to? The community activity center, right? And how are we engaging and connecting across the community? And then, I had the other note on here too, but I hear that this is the residential tower, but I do want to see that vertical integration, and I want to hear the story of how Southdale will continue to evolve. And I know that that's not all within your purview, but it needs to be that complete story of how does this play a role. And, right now, I get questions about, well, what will the mall be there in 20 years? It's like, well, I don't know that anyone knows that, but I would think that if you're proposing this development here tonight, you would want this tower to be there in 20 years, right? And so I think that we would need to hear what's the vision for this area? And I understand that, things will continue to evolve, and as we learn more about what is this post, obviously we're still in the pandemic, but post-pandemic world where I do think you're going to find people loving the lifetime work and being able to live right there and walk to everything. But I think that we'll continue to learn. So yes, there will be some evolution, but I want to see that tight story. The other things, affordability is really important to me. I really want to see that within this, because I don't want an exclusive community. I think there's definitely an appetite for affordability within this space. I also think it's interesting to be relocating the transit so far away. And I know it's all within Southdale still, so maybe like so far is relative. But I'm thinking about being a resident, and if I'm working downtown or have to go downtown for a Twins game, right now it doesn't seem that easy for me as a resident of this building to get to the transit center, right? And I guess I use Twins, so it's assuming summer months, but like it's an April game and it's snowing. And so what is that connectivity like? And right now it feels like transit was just put to the side. And in one sense, I appreciate the proximity to what the path will be of that line. But as a resident, I think that there's more you could do to couple those. I think that the parking is going to be interesting. So, think a lot about this. One, I do want to see the parking actually hidden. And one way to do that might be to have that residential on all sides of the building, and really tuck the parking in. But even thinking about, the proximity to transit and all of the other amenities that are within walking distance, right? Like this is across the street from Cub Foods, if I'm thinking of that correctly. There's so many foreseeable situations where people just don't have cars. Proximity to the airport, they're going to take a lift to get to the airport, right? And so I would really challenge that 1.5 might be a lot. And especially given how this feels set up today, where, and I echo, I would love to see this be a welcoming environment for families. I would love to live there, but I don't see myself living there with 2 kids. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to use your other developments as examples of what does that kind of target market look like, and how are you then either evolving that if we have different goals with this development, or using that to change things like parking requirements and really thinking about the area that this is in. Because right now, when we look at the aerial maps, when we think about Southdale, we think about seas of parking. And so take that into account as well. I thought I wrote down ice rink when I was hearing like a different commissioner talk, and I love that idea. So when we talk about parks and that community activity, how can we just bring more people into this area, I think is ultimately the most important piece. But breaking it up, and figuring out how is it a part of Edina, not how is it a village within Edina.
Okay.
Commissioner Bennett.
All right. Wow, I shouldn't have many comments left after all that. Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for all the opportunities to improve upon, clearly. To me, this is a very exciting project in a very exciting place and a very fitting place for this type of concept and this type of physical change. As I look toward the future, and as we look toward a lot of the guidance that we've put together in the city, again, like the height, perfect. It could be less tall, but this is the kind of precedent I would want to start with right there around Southdale with, I would say, if we all took a poll of residents, what are you most uncertain about in the future of Southdale? It's the center, and it occupies so much area. And if you look at the district plan let me go to it, on page 35, they show a good, oh my God, this is going to take me a while, sorry. There's a lot of pages in this thing. So on page 35, they do a nice representation, figure 4.2, of the transformation of shopping centers. And a lot of it goes to what fellow commissioners said. They will turn into likely centers, not shopping centers. And you guys are doing that kind of by yourself, integrating a bunch of uses, but a lot of how it's foreseen is more vertical integration of uses around. But I agree that I would rather start somewhere doing what you're doing than not do anything and keep waiting for it to die out. And so I feel a sense of urgency, and I would err on the side of supporting this project, even if it weren't perfect in my eyes, because it's starting to challenge a lot of the ways we think about centers and that core part of Edina. And hopefully, I mean, if this gets built, it will certainly serve as a catalyst to other development just for height and Simon Properties getting more creative with other developers and partners such as yourselves. Just looking toward the district plan, there's a bunch of aspirations it has, and I feel like if you go through those one by one, you guys are really hitting on a lot of them to the core. I would say the main thing missing, and what's been kind of the theme amongst us all, is the inclusivity. I think in Edina, the reality is people want some exclusivity. That's just what's in our city, and I think that's totally supported in the project. 32 stories in the air. So, like, if you're not integrating it vertically, I would expect some sort of creative implementations on that main level of where you're going to engage pedestrians and cyclists and other users of the mall that aren't excited to go to the mall right now. But this could be, the gateway for reinvigorating things. And one of the ideas that was coming to mind, it's aspiration number one. I probably won't get to it in time, but there's a nice image that shows kind of what the design experience guidelines then show of like a street room. And so I don't feel that in any of these corridors. And so whether it's, I understand in even the plan, it's like you have these triangular 2 by 200 foot blocks. Like, it just doesn't work with how Southdale's oriented, not north, southeast, west. But it doesn't mean you couldn't create more of those corridors of interest where there is activity. And so could it be you're partnering with Simon to start to bring some of the mall out and have a corridor that has retail but has residential stuff incorporated to it? And when you see the images in these documents, like, you feel that buzz, like there's stuff going on, and that's that inclusivity of not necessarily, you're not going to be able to afford to live there for most people, but you could afford to go there and enjoy it. And I'm not seeing that engagement anywhere, and you have that opportunity because you're in one way transforming what the mall is. I mean, if you look at the mall now and then if this were built, it's like, whoa, what happened? It's the beginning of the transformation. So I think we want to set a good precedent with how we engage with the mall and the retail components, possibly bringing them more to the outdoor style or having some restaurants or some ways to engage people as you're walking through. That's kind of my biggest maybe ask and what I'd love to see, because I don't see the exciting, enticing activity for a visitor just in the area or a stranger stumbling upon it. One question I have for affordability for the living quarters is concepts around, like, even for the employees. You know, I'm assuming most of them couldn't afford to live in this kind of place, but is there some sort of creative concept of having some sort of living arrangements or a situation that's, you know, kind of used to more surround the building with active residential uses? And that's what we start to see in the guidelines, is like you might have some walk-up things like you mentioned, but maybe lining some of those corridors with residential would be of great benefit. Otherwise, just all in all, like what you're presenting and the excitement you have, I mean, I've been on this commission for 6 years, and this brings some relief where, like, I feel like someone is really trying to be innovative and bold and transformative. And even though it's not like matching everything perfectly, like, you are doing that and bringing that here. And I really respect it. And since you can do that, I know you could do even better by the next time we see you. So that's kind of what I expect. And I really thank you for bringing this to us.
Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
I appreciate that. You know, we admittedly, when we got the AFO report, I was taken aback. I was surprised. We were really focused on trying to incorporate the guiding principles. And as we were trying to dig through it, and ESG, as our design partner, really tried to dig through that and what does it mean. The only thing that I couldn't perfectly say we could accommodate was the perfect 200-foot by 200-foot grid. And so when that report came out, we were all taken aback, right? So it doesn't mean that we can't dust off our plans and continue to study. That's why we're here. I mean, we were surprised. So I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate everybody's comments. We definitely are listening to all of them and want to address all of them. But as I said, there's a lot of stakeholders, right? There's a lot of stakeholders involved. And to create that perfect recipe, it's a challenge. It's really a challenge. We're up for it, though.
Any other final thoughts? All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you for being invested into this area and for presenting with us tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Next up on the agenda is our chair and member comments.
Is this where the public can comment?
So tonight, we don't have a public hearing for the sketch plan in particular, and we had our community comment for items not on our agenda at the beginning of the meeting tonight.
The comment about the proposed renderings and so on.
For the sketch plan, it's not an open public hearing. Sorry. But yes, chair and member comments tonight. Please.
Just briefly, I had asked staff to look into landscaping issue around Southdale area, and I just wanted to thank the staff for the quick follow-up and for the good results that resulted. So thank you all for doing that.
Excuse me. There's been, I've been mentioning updates to the Three Rivers Park's 9 Mile Creek Trail going under 169, and I'm happy to say that it's actually officially finished, or it's rideable now, walkable. It's open, I should say. So they still have landscaping and stuff to do, but I've ridden it, and it's really wonderful. It makes a huge difference from what was there before. So it's finished.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett?
Yeah, I forgot to share some of this last time. I've missed a couple meetings recently being out of town, and one of which was the Grandview Public Works site meeting, where most people were like, yeah, let's do it. If I were here, and I just wanted to share some context, just for the benefit of fellow new commissioners or residents listening, I would not have supported it. I would have joined Commissioner Miranda for a number of reasons. And I want to share some context because I feel like it's important, as well as frustrations or disappointments with the process. So some context, like when I moved to Edina almost a dozen years ago, you know, we've lived within 3 blocks of the Grandview area, and that was definitely part of the reason we moved to that specific spot. And I know I'm not alone with the majority of my generation gravitating more toward, you know, proximity to services. And so that was a huge reason of why we chose there, so we could walk to get groceries. And soon after moving, you know, being aware of the development of the framework, I was involved with that. I'm like, this is exciting. The city was going to sell it off. The residents were like, let's save the public works site. Let's do something great. And that catapulted into a huge framework for the whole area. And then I served on a community advisory team afterwards to advise the city council of how to go about the public works process. And there's been diverging thoughts throughout. But the context is key because that site is so critical to, like, what could be done on that could transform and start to transform that area in incredible ways. And what was on the table and what's been on the table is just that, like the ability to take 3.3 acres in the heart of this underutilized commercial node, take it away from an auto-centric node, make it walkable, and start to transform the area. And it was hinged in the framework and all the discussions on a major public amenity, both indoor and outdoor, called the Grandview Commons. So I keep honing in on that, is that was at the core of the framework, it's the core of the discussion, and yet we've made decisions throughout the last year in the process. We've gone so far down the road without even identifying what that major public amenity, indoor-outdoor component is to really draw people in. Like we're talking about tonight, like what those developers brought is really innovative and transformative, even if it's not just right. But what we basically committed to, in my opinion, is like pretty much the biggest tragedy in potential land use in Edina that I've been around for. We sold the lots separately for standalone uses. You have more senior housing in the area, and we've committed 0.7 acres to a restaurant. And if you look at, say, Devani's in the area, that building and the parking lot accommodates 0.7 acres. Like, that's what we're committing, another suburban concept. And we're steering away from that vertical mixed use. And so I've been at least trying to influence the city council and share thoughts about the process throughout, but the process in general hasn't engaged the community like we may have thought. So there was no community comment through Better Together on it because people just don't know about it. There was supposed to be a recommendation of, like, you know, a design shred or some sort of open house or a programming committee formed to really identify that public use and situation and build around that. And we've just done it backwards. And when we agreed to sell that land, it's like, yes, this is going to be good, but it could have been great. And I feel like I failed, and I apologize to everyone out there, but I feel like the process was, you know, it's in process of a failure. And if we had that identified when we talked about the local option sales tax, think of like what regional thing could have been there that we could have got easy funding for. So I would say, like, my encouragement and my lessons learned is to be a little more aggressive and assertive with the convictions we have and maybe engage more people, because I pretty much was keeping it just with the city council. But I think if, you know, we're a more united front in certain things and strong beliefs, and even community-wide, like we can really bring the right change to the city instead of kind of letting it happen in a vacuum. And that's what's happened. Like, decisions have been made and people don't really know, and it's going to be something nice, but we're missing something like transformative, like we saw just proposed tonight. And so I just had to say something because I've been ruminating like constantly, and I just need to get off my chest, and I appreciate you guys listening to my comments. Thanks.
I would comment, Commissioner Bennett. We looked at 10 or 11 projects that were in some advanced detail. So it wasn't like there could have been a weariness. This is our 10th or 11th time. Let's do something. There could be an element of that, but we gave that 3.5 or whatever 7 acres of land all the scrutiny that we could, and the projects varied from. I loved like version 3, which was the art center and the big, there were elements, but nothing ever carried. And from the beginning, that project was cursed with, is it public land, should stay public land, or should the city not get involved in development? And it went back and forth, and it never found a solution. And there was perhaps a bit of weariness. But, I don't disagree.
I
had some stuff that I liked, but I liked some earlier versions much better too.
Yeah, and what I'll say is a lot of the versions didn't start with a framework. I mean, if you looked at the framework and how it envisioned the site, a lot of the things proposed just weren't even close to that, you know. And then the finance side is like the city's been just, or leaders have been like averse to spending or investing in that. But like, we've done surveys. People were willing to increase property taxes to support some amenity. So, I mean, just look at what we've agreed to. Like, we still haven't paid for any public component on that site or even identified what that could be or should be. And that's what we should have started with and built around. So, like, just process-wise, we missed something big. And I'm bummed, and I feel like I failed, so.
Any other?
I could share a quick comment. With regards to Southdale, we certainly want to see Southdale be developed into a beautiful, walkable city with a lot of innovative, creative-looking buildings. And I know in the discussions that we had tonight, some of the comments came up that was, what does that all-encompassing plan look like? I know we have the design guidelines, and that's supposed to help us a little bit, but I think it's, we're on this journey, right? We're trying to balance new things that show up, and we're trying to think on the fly of how does this fit into this bigger puzzle. And, to your point, this is new, creative, it's pushing the envelope, maybe it's not getting everything that we want, but sometimes I struggle a little bit with trying to form that larger picture, Here's this one building, one developer that's coming in with something different. Okay, what's the next person going to come with? What's the third person going to come with? And how does that all piece together like a nice Lego piece to build this beautiful city that we want? And so I love the comments that you guys bring up. It helps us think. I feel like we need a little bit more exposure to the design guidelines maybe, and some more visioning, so that when folks show up, we could say, oh, I know exactly where this could fit in or what can be changed to make it happen. So I'm looking forward to more of these meetings with more ideas, but just want to be honest that I sometimes struggle with trying to see how this one developer is going to fit into that larger picture.
To that point, I'd like to point out that the city of Blaine worked with the owners of Northtown Mall to come up with a master land use plan for the entire area. And so the sort of thing that we're talking about, I mean, the Southdale guidelines are for a much, much larger area than just Southdale itself, right? But here you have a city working with a private landowner, kind of reimagining what that one piece of land could be in the area surrounding it. And so it seems like the owner of Southdale has not engaged in that sort of planning with the city, and I think that makes these sort of projects harder because they're piecemeal, right? And they're a little infill here and a little bit infill there, and we don't have to know how everything's going to go, but if we had some structure, I think it'd be easier to approve things and to tell them what we think we want. So the Southdale guidelines have basically all we have at this point because the landowner hasn't really worked with us as far as I know. So anyway, it's possible other cities have done it. So.
Just to add, I saw a lot of heads nod when you said that during the comments earlier of like the master plan. And I'm like, that is exactly what's missing. Because I mean, you look through this stuff and like it should be the nucleus of that area, right? And it doesn't have individual attention like even some of the small area plans do of like the public works site, like I mentioned, the framework had a specific section on just that, what should be done there. And it doesn't touch with heavy detail at all the Southdale Center property, which is, when you look at that area, the greatest opportunity because of all the pavement. And so are we like recommending to get a plan together for that? Because I would second that. Like, that should have informed what we saw tonight. And I guess this is what happens. You know, someone proposes something and it prompts us to respond. And I thought that was a great idea, and I'd never even thought of it until you said it. I'm like, duh, that's what we need.
We could add it to as one of our areas of interest to our work plan for 2023, I think.
Yeah, so on the at the work group meeting earlier today, one of the things proposed was looking at areas of interest, areas of change within the city. And so that could be added, you know, like France Avenue, because the E-line's going on there, and Lincoln Drive, you know, so maybe this could be another one of the, where it would be just preliminary, what could be here sort of thing. Yeah.
I just want to share my appreciation. I know I was doing it with Joanne earlier because I always valued her comments, but I just thought everything, like all of the commissioners' comments tonight were really good, right? I wish I could come up with a better like adjective for that, but gooder. They're so gooder. I'm just so impressed with this group of volunteers, right? I see the amount of effort, right? We all have the same packets that goes into this, but every single meeting that I'm in with each of you, I am continually impressed with the thought and the consideration and how invested we all are in helping to shape Edina. So I don't know, I won't always like get sappy and stuff, but I think tonight after a really big thing like this, right? Like considering a 32-story residential development that would be the tallest in Edina and is a core component of the Southdale area, I think it's big, and it just causes me to take that step back and think, one, just how fortunate I feel to be in this position to have a say and to help influence that. And it just makes me really impressed with all of you too. So thank you.
You're here.
All right, Carrie, any staff comments?
I would concur with what you just said. Fantastic job by the group tonight. And I don't have a report because the council has not met since the last time we have met. So that's it for me.
But we will be meeting with the council on Tuesday. So the Planning Commission is presenting our parking ordinance, and it will be discussed with them. So tune in. Okay. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned.